I'd like to show you two more features of assembly that I find very useful in design. And that's how to both edit a component in an assembly as well as how to create a new component in an assembly. So to start, I'm going to edit a component. Let's say I want to edit this base part. I see that there is maybe I need a hole here and I need a hole here because maybe I didn't think I had room before, but I now know I have room. So to edit the component, I can simply click Edit Component. Now it's going to ask to save the component, to save the assembly. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to save it. And I'll just save it as bearing assembly. And when you save an assembly, it'll want to save the components. And now you can see that the rest of the parts have turned wireframe, whereas this base plate has stayed solid. That indicates you're editing the part. And now you can see that I've got a feature menu, a sketch, just like before. And it's all housed within this edit component, and it's all housed within this extrude base plate 1. Clicking this or this will bring us back to the assembly. But first what I want to do is I want to do a hole wizard. And I want to maybe just do a 1/2 inch hole. And I want to do it on this surface. And as you can see, what I can do is I can actually use the geometry from the assembly to define where I want these holes. So for instance, I can make that point, and it's sort of annoying because it will always default to you selecting the geometry of the part you're editing. So what I will do is I will actually flip it over so I can sort of see this line, because I want to make those pierce. That just brings this point to where this line pierces the plane of the sketch. And I just want to do all of these pierce, just like that. And again, I'm just holding Control to select the different entities. And there we have it. That's fully defined. And I'm going to be finished editing the sketch. And now we've got these holes. And an interesting feature of this is, let's say, for instance, in this bearing, in this original sketch, I were to edit the sketch and maybe make it a little bit bigger. So let's say this is going to be 1 inch. Now you can clearly see that the edge lines, which those holes are based on, are no longer going to be concentric with the edge of the part. So we're going to hit OK. We're going to exit the sketch. We're going to exit this. And you can see that in the process of rebuilding it, it actually moved those circles. This can be a very powerful design tool so that you can design, say, a chassis or a car body or something around your other components, such that if the other components have to change, to some extent, the parts you're designing will change with them. The far extreme of this would be actually defining a new part entirely within the assembly. To do that, you can just simply go to Insert Components, New Part, and then what it's looking for, you can see this sort of check mark, is it's looking for you to define the first plane where you're starting your part. So if we just do this front, this edge of this extrude, we can see we've got a new part, and it's called Part 1, and it's in brackets, and that's because it's considered inside the assembly part, and we're already editing it. So we can see that the front plane is the plane that I just selected, and the origin is the where the origin of our assembly projected to that plane. So now I can very easily make a box, and using the geometry already in the assembly, and I can create a sketch that is 100% based off of this assembly. So I can just make a box that will be the size of this assembly, and I can just simply extrude it. A known quantity, or I could relate this quantity to something else. And there we have it. And what I can do is I can slowly double click to make it so I can change the part name, and I can just call this maybe a plate, because that's sort of what it is. It's a plate with no mounting holes. And now we can finish editing the component, and there we have it. Note that this plate is not fixed, but it is fully defined. See, if we try to move it, it says it's fully defined, it cannot be moved. And again, that's because you very firmly defined it earlier when you sketched it. Now what we can do is we can just hit save, and it'll prompt you. It'll say that varying models have been changed. Remember, we changed the base plate, we've changed the bearing, and we now have this plate. So if we click Save All, it's going to prompt this. And this has to do with the change for that plate. Because we've created a new part, we can either save it internally, such that you'll never be able to actually see it as a part file, or we can save it externally, and it'll be just like a part file in any other part. Generally, I like to save them externally, and usually I just like to save them in the same spot that I saved them before, and you can change the path very easily. So we're just going to hit OK, and there we have it. Now that's no longer in brackets, which again suggests an internal part, and we've got a new part. So to do the next part, I'm going to show you how to. Well, first of all, we're going to undo the things we've done. So I'm going to delete the plate, and I'm going to delete these holes in the base plate, and I'm going to modify the sketch back to what it was, with this radius being 0.75. Now, before we can get back to creating the drawing for it, we have one more thing to do, and that is create the exploded view. So to do this, we're just going to do an exploded view. What that's going to do is, you can see up here we've switched tabs from the feature manager to the property manager, and we have to do steps. So the first step we're going to do is we're going to take off the screws, because that makes sense. You would take off the screws before you take anything else off. So we're going to click this, and we're going to hold Control and click this. You can see we've got both selected, and now you can see all this crazy doohickey. We can rotate about any of these axes, and we can translate in any direction. It makes sense to translate up, so we're just going to click and drag, and we'll bring it up, say here. We want to bring it up kind of high, because these two are also going to come up, and that's the exploded step 1. Now the next step could be bringing these up. So I'm again hitting Control, and I'm going to bring these up a little ways. And the last would be bringing this up even further. So bringing this, and there we have it. Now, if you want to modify or delete any of these steps, it's very easy to do so. You can just simply delete or edit them. And once we're done, we just simply hit OK. And now we can see it dumped us back into the bearing assembly, and it seems like we just moved these around, and it seems a little strange. Maybe I want them back together. So what we can do is we can simply go to the property or the configuration manager. We can open up our configuration, and we can open up we can see this exploded view, and we can see the different steps. And what we can do is we can hit collapse, or explode, or animate collapse, or animate explode. And there we have it. So I'm going to collapse it, and what we'll do is we will save it as such. And now what we will do is we will now we will create. Now what we will do. And now what we will do is we will create the drawing file. So we will make drawing from assembly. I'll just go with unchecking this, and I'll do a landscape, or you can use whichever template you prefer. And we probably want an isometric view. So I'll just drag that onto the drawing sheet. And we can make them hidden, we can make them not hidden, we can make it shaded with lines, shaded without lines. We're going to go with hidden lines removed but not shaded. We can go to the sheet properties and make sure that the scale is 1:1, or as the case may be, perhaps not 1:1. Another display state you may want is perhaps you wanted an exploded view. To do this, you can simply right click and show an exploded state, or show an unexploded state. Very easy to switch between them. But first we want to create a bill of materials. So we're going to insert tables, bill of materials, from this drawing. So we're clicking the view that we want, and we've got a lot of different options. So we're going to do parts only, and we're going to hit OK. And we can see that we've got the item number, the parts by name, the description of those parts, and again this is linked to the part file, and then the quantity. And we can add and mess around with these tables, and you'll have to play around or ask your instructor if you want to add specific things related to that. You can also determine material. You could have material come up there. You could have a lot of different things come up. One more, the last thing, you can read the book, pages 1437 through about 1440. Will tell you how to really modify this table, but it's a pretty detailed description of the book. I don't think it's really worth going into in this video. The last thing I'm going to show you how to do is create the balloons. And no, it's not helium balloons that you can play around with or get at the zoo. It's actually, I'll show you. So to do view layout, or I'm sorry, we're going to annotation, and we're going to do auto balloon. And what you can see, we're just going to hit OK. We can see all of these balloons. So these are referencing and directly tied to the bill of materials, meaning that number 4 is a cap screw, number 2 is a base plate. And just like dimensions and everything else, there's a ton of stuff associated with this. You can have a bunch of different types of balloon settings, including types of characters you can use, what the balloon text could be, you know, what number balloon it is. You know, there's quite a lot it could be. In addition to the leader lines of each balloon, you can say, you know, rather than bringing up to an edge, perhaps you want to do a face, and then it turns to a dot. You've got a lot of options in there. And again, that's something that's going to be, each person has a little bit of a different preference, so you'll have to figure out what your preference is and the people you're working with preferences are. That's pretty much it. You can again follow the book to see how they advise you lay out the different balloons and whatnot. But that's pretty much the assembly, and you can save it as whatever you need to as is, or possibly add a sheet and create multiple views of this assembly. That's it for this video. I highly recommend going in chapter 15. There won't be a video in chapter 15, but the chapter 15 will show you a pretty important part of the CSWA exam, which is an Associate's Level SolidWorks certification, which is something that by the end of this class, all of you will almost certainly be able to pass. The only thing that you need to learn is how to obtain the center of mass and use reference axes, which is a reasonably easy thing to do. And that's most of chapter 15. In addition to that, I would recommend all of you practicing assembling a little bit more. There's not too many assemblies you'll have to make for this class, so in page 1518 you can see a detailed step just like this of model assembly that you might see on a CSWA exam, as well as your careers after this. So I would highly recommend stepping through that and seeing if you can assemble that without a problem. In the next videos, we'll be covering CamWorks. It's a application that runs within SolidWorks to create computer machining code so that you can actually create parts on, say, a CNC milling machine or some other piece of CNC equipment to cut out parts that you may have designed. So that'll be fun.